Well, hope you're having a good day.
Welcome to the third option. This is actually the second episode of a five-part series for the month of October, although you may be listening to this at any time.
But we've been talking about community, relationships, um, the purpose of belonging.
Yes, it's not good for man to be alone. That was our last episode.
Yeah, and we talked about how we have this innate want, this need or desire to be included,
To belong.
to belong,
And actually, we are in a place of belonging
and we
with
do
God.
belong. And so the first place is that we do belong with God from the very beginning. Um, and so now here we are with people, and we really we're created to be in community with each other.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of imperfect things that go on, and there's a lot of hurts, and there's wounds, and then we get wounded, and then we do things to try to preserve ourselves, or we do things sometimes out of our ignorance and out of a blindness sometimes, or a lost condition of feeling alone, feeling separated, feeling isolated, feeling less than.
Or even feeling like you have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And it almost like unconscious, like impulse to protect yourself.
I'm aware that in my past that I have hurt people, and sometimes it was out of a place that was, not saying that I'm mature now, but less mature than I am now, of trying to protect myself, and there was fear involved in it. So we deal with these things, and because of that, sometimes harm happens in relationships. Sometimes we're wounded by relationships. I know, growing up, that I was raised in a home where I did not feel valued. There was a lot of anger in the home. That's not. I mean, there was good too, but I remember a lot of anger. I almost felt like there was contempt for me in my home.
And a lot of times, even you would say, it's not necessarily that your parents did feel that way. It's just what was felt.
What the way I perceived it.
Mhm.
And I'm also aware that my parents were.
Had their own wounds, had
Yeah.
their own issues. Well, it's interesting because your family of origin, is the first community of humans that you're
Mhm.
aware of.
Yeah.
And so it is the place where you get the deepest hurts and the most extravagant love at times. So
Right.
and
It's community, and we're made to want to belong.
And wanted in your family.
And we want to be wanted. We don't want to be the one that feels like we're the least favored. We don't want to feel like the outcast or the quote black sheep of the family. We want to, there again, like we were saying last episode, we want to feel valued, and some of us didn't get that. Some of us didn't get it sufficiently, and
I would say even that most people have a little bit of both.
Oh yeah. In the people that you
even
run
the
into.
best parents, even the most loving, there will be some wounding.
There's a story.
that
There's a story there
Yeah.
of a pain, of a what's the word I'm looking for? But something that brought shame or fear or a sense of insufficiency or a sense of not belonging. And so then we can carry this hurt, and like you said, in our selfishness, then we usually inadvertently hurt others. It's not like we set out and consciously say, I'm going to go out and hurt as many people as I can, but it happens, and there needs to be healing. And that's why we were talking about in our last episode, talking about it's not good to be alone, why Jesus came to seek and save that which was lost. And that salvation is a bringing us to a wholeness. It's healing our broken heart. And that's, what he said he came to do in Luke 4. I came to heal the brokenhearted. And I've experienced that. I know the beauty of that. And that's why I'm so zealous about talking about the goodness and love of God, because that brought me home. That brought me to a place where I belong. It brought me to a place where I felt valuable and lovable. And my perception was, I did not get that that kind of perception growing up, not only from family, but it carried over into so many other types of
Like
relationships that I
school,
had.
that there's a community in your school,
School,
in your
even
church, in
even with my
your
friends,
friends group.
even with my friends, we had certain things in common. Maybe we all like to smoke dope or something, or do certain kind of, or maybe we all like sports or whatever. And so there was a community in that, but there was still this underlying feeling like I was being treated less than, or don't you dare treat me less than, because I was sensitive to that. This feeling like these people don't like me. I mean, I can remember even pastoring a church later on. I mean, now my life has changed for the better, and I'm pastoring a church, but there's still some of that, some vestiges of those hurts and those thoughts are there. And I can remember even thinking there at one point, I left the platform after I spoke, and there's all these people that have come to hear me, and they want to be with me on Sunday morning, and I hear this accusatory thought in my mind saying, "These people don't like you," you know, and I'm just thinking they don't really like me, you know. And it was hard for me to accept that I was lovable, that I was likable, because I had been wounded in
What's so
relationships.
interesting about that is even hundreds of people
Hmm.
saying they do like
Hmm.
you won't heal that
No.
the way that God Himself
Hmm.
can heal it.
Yeah. So, and that's the first part of the first community we belong to is with God. That's the first relationship that gets restored, and that's one reason Jesus Himself came as God, dressed like man, came as God to bring restoration, and He gave us examples on purpose of Him going to a man like Zacchaeus, going on purpose, having to go to a Samaritan woman, and these different ones that were isolated and outcast. And he shows us that when he encounters these people, they're brought home in their heart. They are restored. Their hearts are made whole, and they become the person that God delights in, that God made them to be.
You know, that the Samaritan woman, she was going to the well at noon to avoid people because they were gossiping about her for whatever reason. After her encounter with Jesus, she goes running right back to those very people she was trying to avoid,
Mhm.
to really to minister to them, to really to tell them about Jesus. All of that shame, all of that self-protection has just fallen off of her, and she's returned to an authentic state, really her own authentic state. And the people see that and recognize that, and they then come and see Jesus.
That's called that authentic state
Mm-hmm.
that we get restored to. That's called worshiping the Father in spirit and in truth, not out of obligation, not out of
You're doing it on
whatever.
the right place, we're doing it at the wrong place, like that.
He said it's not about
It's
that.
not about that.
It's about spirit and in truth, being
Who
being
you
who
really
you
are.
are with the God who loves you
Mm-hmm.
and welcomes you.
You know, it's so interesting in our family systems, that family system of origin, a child will do just about anything to stay in that system, even at the expense of their authentic self. Like if they see that their parents, I don't know, get mad frequently, they'll adjust themselves so that they're kind of helping not create this chaotic
You
atmosphere.
you feel like if I become a better person, that it will change this. And what's interesting is that usually the child does not think the parent is bad; they think they're bad.
Yeah.
So the child grows up and goes through life feeling like I've got to change me. I've got to conform me. I've got to become someone that's acceptable to somebody else. And I had that, and trying to be that, and trying to fit, and never could do enough. And so I didn't get it in my family dynamic growing up. None of us did. My two siblings that I grew up with, it was pointed out one time as we got a little older that someone said, "You guys are not a family," because we were all like every person for himself.
Yeah.
And so we were not functioning in that community family, but we really would like to. I mean,
You just didn't know how,
we
because
didn't know
was it
about it. We just
modeled
thought,
with, yeah. And also children are selfish. They are naturally,
mhm,
they're growing, so they're forming, but they're naturally in a good sense narcissistic. I mean, not the bad narcissism, but it does feel like it's all about them, and they're learning their place within the community. And so there is the sense of like, I've got to, I'm the one that's responsible for what's happening in my family.
yeah, and so you become the scapegoat. You become the problem is you.
Yeah.
And so then we want to become good. And so,
Or we could be just like, I give up. I'm
well,
just going to be the bad.
and I did both of those.
Yeah, you did.
So I went for
Yeah, I did
years
too.
of just the hell with it. I'm just going to be take the road of least resistance, which is easy to be the bad guy. I tried being good. I never could be good enough. I'll just be the bad guy. There's other bad guys that I can run around with. We're in a community. You're always finding your community somehow.
Where everybody knows your name.
Right. But, it's like the prodigal son. He left his house, he left his family, and he joined himself to another citizen of that community, says. And so he did that. So he's living like he's in community or family with these other people, and he's forsaken the first one. Now, when he wants to finally go back, he still wants that family, but he says, I'm not worthy to be called my father's son because of the things that I've done. Um, at best, I should be a servant. But of course, we love the story because he finds out the father says, no, you're welcome here. You do have a place here. You belong here. You are my son. Always have been. You didn't stop being that because you went out and acted out and because you did all these horrible things. You didn't lose your value. You have been my son. You were always my son. And I wanted to bring you home.
He was really lost to himself of who he really was. I mean, here he is. He's left home and he's out eating with the pigs, and just in this really low state where there's not enough for him. He's not being provided for. He's not caring. And he even says to himself, the servants in my father's house were even treated better than I am at this point. So it was really out of self-preservation that he's like, just take me as a servant.
Yeah.
But he was in for a bigger lesson than just self-preservation.
Yeah. And what was the lesson?
Yeah.
That he was lovable and he belonged.
He belonged in the house.
And he found his true self. He found his true place with his family. He found his true community, his true place. And a
restoration always triggers a celebration.
Yeah.
Don't you notice that? There was a big celebration to celebrate not just a bad person becoming a good person, but a restoration into who you truly were made, always meant to be.
And there again, see, we don't see the father making the son promise that he'll never do it again. We don't even see him saying like, well, I'll put you on probation, and if you act good for a year or 6 months, then we'll restore you. He doesn't do any of that. He says, you always belonged right here. Welcome home. And that's what salvation is. That's what God does. And in that salvation, we find out that Daddy has always loved us. We find out that we always belong with him. And I bet you the prodigal son didn't have an itch to leave the family and go do his own thing like that again. He found where he belonged. And I feel like I have found that with God. And I feel like I found it with myself. I feel like my heart has experienced a wholeness. And it's a continual healing that takes place for all of us, but it has experienced a wholeness where I'm home with myself. I got to where it's like I can look at my own weaknesses and say, yeah, that's me. I would like to do better, but I am still lovable. I'm still acceptable. I still have a place with God. That's where the gospel gets rid of all guilt and condemnation, even though we're still weak, and all that. But it doesn't disqualify us from belonging. And that's the message that the gospel gives us. So it's not about behavior. at all. It really is about the goodness, the grace, the love of God.
Mm-hmm.
And everything we talk about comes back to that all the time.
Yes, because we also want to talk about healing in community, and so with people, and so a lot of times harm can happen. Let's say even in a church community where someone who you trusted and loved kind of turned their back on you or didn't accept you after something. Some deep hurt comes, and then there's this instinct to like completely jump out of community. But
Mm-hmm.
and there is hurt that happens when you're vulnerable or when you've exposed yourself. There can be hurt without the substance of a relationship with God, without that union or that restoration power. You're going to be at the mercy of people being people, and they're going to let you down and harm you. But if you're equipped with the knowing of your union with God, you're better able to navigate the inevitable things that happen with relationships
Yeah,
with
because
people.
those hurts will eventually they drive you to more and more of an isolation because we're gonna keep cutting people off to try to protect ourselves till
Yeah.
eventually we're all by ourselves because humans are not perfect and they hurt us because they're not perfect. They're not God.
Yeah.
And they hurt us. And the way the healing comes is it's an opportunity. And while you were just describing that, I started thinking of a couple of different instances to where I was hurt really bad. There was a time, and I was an associate pastor in a church, and I just got so offended one time. I got my feelings hurt, basically, is what it was. Uh, Somebody didn't think I was as great as I thought they should think that I was. And my ego was hurt really, and it hurt me, and I just said that's it, and I went home and I just said, God, I'm done with humans. I just want to be just me and you. I just want to go live on a mountain all by myself with me and you, and I'll worship you, and me and you will have a good time.
It seems so much easier, right?
Right. And then, of course, I remembered the scripture where Jesus said, if you don't love people, you don't love me. And I'm like, well, I think I can. But, but really, I needed these people. I had a lot of growing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in these places, oh, I love this, in these places of hurt, because as you said, I did have a connection with God. Um, it, I moved toward godliness. I moved to the things that were going to help me to grow, even in a situation like this. Even though the situation was bad, I didn't like it. There was a place that I could grow. I needed to be healed for one thing, and the healing always came through the God qualities that I found. It came through forgiveness, which is mercy and love,
And
and
grace.
and I would find that. And one time I felt like I was betrayed so badly that I just there again I wanted to just quit everything. That's what you want to do. You just want to pull away and separate. It's what you want to do.
What I'll say is I'm like, God, is this really good for me to be a part of this group? Like, is this really healthy for me? Because this feels hurtful.
Yeah, I think I'll just go be by myself.
I think that might be
that way people
better.
won't hurt me. But see, because harm comes, pain comes in relationships, but healing also comes in, and it's beautiful when it does, and it elevates you. So the time I felt like I was so betrayed, when I found the beauty and the power of forgiveness for that person, I found a revelation of grace that I had never seen before. And I found a revelation of grace for the people that had hurt me as well as myself. And that opened me up to a greater vista of God's love and his graciousness in creation. And so I grew, and something happened to me that I don't know if it would have happened, without that. If it did, it would have taken a lot longer. And I don't know. I really don't know. But something happened, elevation, a healing was working in my heart, and it changed me. And that was about the time when I started to see that God was more gracious than I thought he was, that God loved me more than I thought he did. And I found the joy of embracing God's heart, first of all for me, but also his heart for other people, even those that may have hurt me. And it made me more gracious, which is what I've always wanted to be loved like God loves, but I would get so self-protective because of the pain. And this opened me up to embrace more of God's heart, and I took on more of the heart of God, and I became more gracious. And to the degree that sometimes people that meet me now, they just feel like I've always been there. They just think I was probably born that way or something. I was just born a merciful person. And I'm like, you have no idea. My personality was exactly the opposite because I was afraid of being hurt. But I found out that in the hurt, there is a healer. There is a healing in that. And it gave me the opportunity to step into more of not only who I really wanted to be, but I wanted to be that because that's who I really was, and I knew it. And I feel like I'm more of my authentic self when I'm loving, when I'm giving, when I'm forgiving, when I'm gracious, when I'm merciful, and there's a great joy in that with these people. See, I can't be forgiving unless there's people to forgive. Right. I can't be merciful unless there are people that need mercy. I can never know those attributes of the heart of God and myself without people that need mercy, forgiveness, and grace. And in this human condition, there's lots of opportunities to give grace, to give forgiveness. And those are the same opportunities where we can get angry, we can self-pretend, we can self-defend, and we can isolate.
Self-protect.
The self-protect, and we can isolate in those exact same situations. We can go one way or we can go the other. And the scary thing is that the isolation is the instinctive voice for a lot of people that comes up and says, I'm just going to pull away because you don't want to get hurt. Right. But if you've got a connection with Daddy, he'll lead us and guide us, and he'll say, come on, son, come on, daughter. He says, I'm going to walk you in this, and you can do this. And in those same situations, whereas we could have been self-protective, we could have been angry, just say some hurtful, hateful things and isolate. Or with that same situation, we can move the other direction and go towards mercy and forgiveness and grace. And those are the ones that bring freedom. They make us bigger. They heal our hearts. And they bring us into more of our authentic self. And they bring joy. And I always love it to this day when there's an opportunity to be gracious to someone. When I can go either way. I can be gracious or I can self-protect. And I can just be gracious. And I like the feeling that the graciousness gives.
Yeah, I actually really relate to that with a family member who had really seriously hurt me. And for years, I was trying to forgive them and feeling like I just don't want to be around them. I don't want to have a part of them. And as I began to, I guess, grow in grace and understanding the grace of God and his grace towards me, I began to almost instinctively extend grace to this other person. And I had to learn how to navigate that relationship because it wasn't like we were going to be best friends or, it was going to be like nothing ever happened. But there was a graciousness that I feel like the Lord taught me. And what you just mentioned is so true, is it feels so good
Isn't
to
it?
Love that person who really, really hurt me, to be able to give love back, like to turn back and rather than retribution, give grace and love to that person. It just feels so.
And isn't wonderful. That how giving love and grace, isn't that its own reward? Just the feeling that you get from it. I mean, you feel clean, you feel big, you feel free, you feel there's a joy with it. Now we can go the other way and we can try to protect ourselves and stand up for ourselves, and
it seems like the hurt doesn't heal though.
It doesn't at all. We feel worse.
It's like if I can just get away from them, I won't get to see them. But it doesn't
you
actually
still feel
leave.
Horrible.
You still think about it. You'll be up at night and you can't fall asleep.
You're
and
still hurting. You can't even stand the mention of their name.
Yeah.
So what we're acknowledging in this episode is the pain is real. We understand it. It's understandable. We've all felt it. We know that it happens, and it's not an excuse for what people may do to us, but we're understanding that there's reasons they do it, and that allows us to be merciful. It's the knowledge of God. The knowledge of God is what gives us the ability to be gracious and merciful and understanding. And I found out it wasn't until I realized God was gracious toward me that way, was ever gracious and wasn't holding anything against me, that I had that kind of grace to give.
Yes. And I've also seen it in the example of people who have given me grace when I didn't deserve it. You do that to me. And just that giving of grace, it does something in your heart, and you're like, I want to be like that. Like, I want to be able to do that too.
Didn't it do that with everybody that Jesus gave grace to in the Bible?
Yeah.
It brought the change.
It
Brought them into their authentic self.
Think about the demoniac who was
even
cutting
him.
himself and just going crazy in the graveyard, screaming and all of that. One encounter with Jesus, and he's settled in his right mind. He wants to even go
in his right mind.
He even wants to go with Jesus, and Jesus is like, "You stay and give to the friends and family around you."
Yeah.
And he did, and it was just such a remarkable transformation. And I thought it's
beautiful.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. So there's healing in our relationships. And so there again, that's another asset of being in community. And we really want to. We really want to be at one with people. We want to be at peace with humanity. And it's the ways of God that do that. And that's what not only are we learning to be that, but it's the healing of our own hearts that's really happening, because God, He wants us to be made whole. And that's what our salvation is about. Well, thanks for tuning in today, and we hope this was a blessing to you, and we hope you have a great day.